Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The sunlight streaming through the large bay window of their elegant apartment should have signaled a day full of promise, but for Rebecca Lawson, it felt like the world was collapsing. She clutched the sonogram photo in her trembling hands, her heart pounding as she looked at her husband, Ethan. His tailored suit and confident stance betrayed no hint of the turmoil he was about to unleash. "You're pregnant." Ethan's voice was cold, his expression unreadable. Rebecca nodded, a smile trying to find its place amidst her nervousness. "Yes, Ethan. We're going to be parents." Instead of the joy she hoped for, she saw something else flicker in his eyes. Irritation. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair and let out a bitter laugh. "Do you realize what this means, Rebecca?" he snapped, pacing the room. "This is going to ruin everything." "Ruin?" "Ethan, this is our child," Rebecca said, her voice trembling. She took a step toward him, but he held up his hand. "I told you when we got married that I didn't want distractions," he said. His tone clipped. "I'm on the verge of making partner at the firm. This is the worst possible timing." Rebecca felt the sting of his words pierce through her. "A child isn't a distraction, Ethan. It's our future." Ethan's gaze hardened. "No, Rebecca. You're the distraction. I've carried you long enough. Your little part-time job as a writer. How is that contributing to our future? I've been the one shouldering everything, and now you're throwing this at me." Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes as his words sank in. She had always known Ethan was ambitious, but she had never imagined he would see her, and their unborn child, as obstacles. "You can't mean this," she whispered. "We're supposed to be a team." Ethan laughed again, a harsh, bitter sound. "A team? Rebecca, you've been riding my coattails for years. I need someone who adds value, not someone who drags me down." The weight of his betrayal was suffocating. Rebecca clutched her stomach instinctively, as if shielding her unborn child from the venom of his words. "So what are you saying, Ethan? You want me to leave?" He straightened, his decision seemingly made. "Yes, I want you out. Take whatever you need to get by for a while. But this," he gestured toward her stomach, "this is your responsibility, not mine." Rebecca stood frozen, disbelief washing over her like a tidal wave. She had given everything to their marriage, supported Ethan's dreams, and put her own ambitions on hold. And now, when she needed him the most, he was discarding her like a burden. "You're heartless," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, I'm practical," Ethan said, his tone void of remorse. "You'll thank me one day when you realize I was right." Rebecca packed her things that evening, her heart heavy and her mind racing. She couldn't afford the apartment on her own, and with no savings to fall back on, her options were limited. As she stepped out onto the bustling streets of the city, she realized she was completely alone. But as she cradled the sonogram photo, a spark ignited within her, a determination she hadn't felt in years. Ethan may have cast her aside, but she would find a way to rebuild her life. For herself, for her child. Rebecca moved in with her older sister Lisa, who lived in a modest but cozy home in a nearby suburb. Lisa was appalled by Ethan's actions and welcomed Rebecca with open arms, promising to help her through the storm. "You're stronger than you think," Lisa said one night as Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, poring over job listings. "Ethan's loss is your gain. You'll see." Rebecca wasn't so sure. Every rejection email from potential employers chipped away at her confidence. Her resume was sparse, her experience limited to freelance writing and administrative work. She felt invisible in a world that demanded more than she could offer. But then, one evening, as she cleaned out a box of her belongings, she stumbled upon an old journal from her college days. Inside were notes from a law course she had taken as an elective, a course she had excelled in. Memories of her passion for justice and debate came flooding back, and for the first time in weeks, Rebecca felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, she enrolled in a part-time law program at a nearby university. It was a bold move, one that required juggling her pregnancy, classes, and part-time work. But Rebecca was determined. Every late-night study session, every penny saved, every sacrifice she made brought her closer to her goal. As the months turned into years, Rebecca's hard work began to pay off. She gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, whom she named Nathan, and balanced motherhood with her grueling schedule. Lisa became her rock, helping care for Nathan while Rebecca pursued her dreams. By the time Rebecca graduated at the top of her class, she had transformed into a confident and capable woman. She secured a position at a prestigious law firm and quickly made a name for herself as a fierce advocate for the underprivileged. Her work was deeply personal. Every case reminded her of the struggles she had endured and the strength she had discovered within herself. But Rebecca wasn't done yet. She had bigger dreams, dreams that would take her to heights even Ethan couldn't have imagined. When the opportunity arose to run for a judicial position, Rebecca seized it. Her campaign was rooted in her story of resilience and determination, and it resonated with voters across the district. The night she was elected judge, Rebecca stood on stage with Nathan by her side, her heart swelling with pride. She had come so far from the woman Ethan had dismissed all those years ago, and she was just getting started. Rebecca adjusted her robe and straightened the nameplate on her desk. Honorable Rebecca Lawson. The courtroom was quiet in the early hours before proceedings began. The polished wood, the gavel resting on its base, the heavy silence. All of it reminded her of how far she had come. Her journey from being discarded to presiding over cases of law felt surreal at times. But Rebecca knew she was where she was meant to be. It was an unusually busy day on the docket, with cases ranging from minor infractions to more serious civil matters. Her clerk handed her a file as the morning session began, and Rebecca opened it to review the next case. Her breath caught when she read the name, Ethan Warren. She froze, her pulse quickening as memories of their last conversation replayed in her mind. She had never expected to see him again, much less under these circumstances. Rebecca skimmed the details of the case. Ethan, once a rising star at his law firm, was now the defendant in a corruption trial. Accused of embezzling millions of dollars from his clients, he faced the possibility of disbarment and a lengthy prison sentence. The courtroom filled as the session began. Rebecca took a deep breath and entered the room, her head held high. She glanced briefly at Ethan, seated at the defense table. He looked older, wearier, and far less confident than the man she once knew. His tailored suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders or the nervous flicker in his eyes. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced, and everyone rose as Rebecca took her seat. Ethan's eyes widened when he saw her, and for a moment, he seemed frozen in place. Rebecca met his gaze with a calm, steady expression, betraying none of the storm that raged inside her. This case concerns allegations of financial misconduct against Mr. Ethan Warren, Rebecca said, her voice firm but impartial. Counsel, are you ready to proceed? Ethan's attorney stood and began the opening arguments, but Rebecca barely registered his words. Her focus shifted to Ethan, who avoided her gaze and fidgeted uncomfortably in his seat. She knew she had every reason to feel vindicated, but she also knew the importance of maintaining professionalism. This was her courtroom, and justice was her responsibility. Over the next few days, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Ethan. They detailed how he had diverted client funds into a personal account, falsified records, and used the money to maintain his lavish lifestyle. Witnesses included former clients who had lost their savings and colleagues who had uncovered discrepancies in the firm's accounts. Rebecca listened intently, her expression neutral, but inside she felt a complex mix of emotions. This was the man who had once dismissed her as a burden, who had cast her aside when she needed him the most. And now, he was the one fighting to salvage his reputation and future. During a recess, Ethan approached her desk, flanked by his attorney. Your Honor, he began hesitantly, his voice subdued. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Mr. Warren, I trust this conversation pertains strictly to the case. He hesitated, then nodded. Course. I just wanted to say that it's... Save it for your attorney, Rebecca interrupted, her tone cutting. This court is not the place for personal matters. Ethan's face flushed, and he retreated without another word. Rebecca watched him go, her heart pounding. She had waited years for this moment, but now that it was here, it didn't bring the satisfaction she had imagined. Instead, it left her feeling empty. As the trial neared its conclusion, Ethan took the stand in his defense. He painted a picture of a man under immense pressure, claiming that his actions were the result of poor judgment and desperation rather than malicious intent. He even tried to garner sympathy by referencing the sacrifices he had made for his career. Rebecca remained impassive as she listened. When it came time for closing arguments, the prosecution delivered a powerful speech, emphasizing the trust Ethan had betrayed and the lives he had impacted. After deliberating for a day, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on multiple counts of embezzlement. Rebecca sat tall as she prepared to deliver the sentence. Ethan stood before her, looking defeated. "Mr. Warren," Rebecca began, her voice steady, "you were once a man with great promise and privilege. But you abused the trust placed in you and caused significant harm to others. This court has reviewed the evidence, and the jury has found you guilty." Ethan avoided her gaze, staring at the floor. However, Rebecca continued, "Justice is not about vengeance. It is about accountability and the opportunity for redemption. I hope you use this time to reflect on your actions and strive to become a better person." With that, she handed down a sentence of 5 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 3. It was a fair punishment, one that aligned with precedent, but it also carried a message. Even those who had wronged her would receive impartial judgment in her courtroom. As the bailiff escorted Ethan out, Rebecca allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had every reason to feel triumphant, but instead she felt a deep sense of closure. The chapter with Ethan was finally over, and she could move forward without the weight of his betrayal holding her back. Weeks after the trial, Rebecca sat in her chambers, the morning light streaming through the large window. The weight of Ethan's case lingered in her thoughts. It wasn't his downfall that occupied her mind, but the realization of how far she had come. Once dismissed as a burden, she had risen to become a symbol of justice, not just for others but for herself. One crisp autumn afternoon, Rebecca returned home to find a letter waiting for her in her mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. She paused, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the sender's name. Ethan Warren. Rebecca sat at her kitchen table, the envelope unopened in front of her. Part of her wanted to toss it away, to leave the past where it belonged, but another part of her was curious. With a deep breath, she opened the envelope and began to read. "Dear Rebecca, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I felt compelled to write this. Sitting in a prison cell gives a man plenty of time to think, and I've thought about you every single day since the trial. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about us, and about the life I so carelessly discarded. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I let my ambition blind me to what truly mattered. I told myself that success was the only thing worth pursuing, but now I see that success without integrity means nothing. Watching you preside over my case was both humiliating and eye-opening. I realized that the woman I underestimated, the woman I abandoned, was far stronger than I ever gave her credit for. You didn't just survive, you thrived. And in doing so, you proved me wrong in every possible way. I don't expect forgiveness, Rebecca. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see you now for who you truly are. A remarkable woman, a devoted mother, and a symbol of resilience. You've taught me more about strength and justice than I ever learned in all my years as a lawyer. Thank you for showing me the truth, even if it's too late for me to change what I've done. I hope you and Nathan have the happiness you deserve. Sincerely, Ethan." Rebecca folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, her emotions swirling. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but Ethan's words felt sincere. For the first time in years, she felt a pang of compassion for the man who had once been her husband. Not enough to forgive him, but enough to wish him peace. She tucked the letter away in a drawer, a token of the past she had finally laid to rest. Nathan, now a precocious 6-year-old, bounded into the room, breaking Rebecca's reverie. "Mum, look what I drew," he exclaimed, holding up a crayon masterpiece of the two of them standing in front of a courthouse. Rebecca smiled and pulled him into her arms. "That's amazing, sweetheart. Is that me with the gavel?" Nathan nodded enthusiastically. "You're the boss, Mom." His words warmed her heart. "That's right," she said, ruffling his hair. "And you're my best assistant." Nathan giggled and ran off to add more details to his drawing, leaving Rebecca alone with her thoughts. Her life was far from what she had imagined when she first married Ethan, but in many ways it was so much better. She had built a career she was proud of, surrounded herself with people who truly valued her, and raised a son who was her greatest joy. Months later, Rebecca attended a gala honoring leaders in the legal profession. As she mingled with other judges and attorneys, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Lisa, her sister, who had been her steadfast supporter through every trial and triumph. "I'm so proud of you, Rebecca," Lisa said, raising her glass in a toast. "You've come so far." Rebecca smiled, clinking her glass against Lisa's. "I couldn't have done it without you. Or Nathan. He's my greatest motivation." As the evening progressed, Rebecca was called to the stage to deliver a speech. She spoke about the importance of resilience, justice, and using one's experiences to uplift others. Her words resonated with the audience, many of whom gave her a standing ovation. Among the crowd, Rebecca caught sight of a man who looked out of place, a prison guard standing near the back. She approached him after the event, curious. "Can I help you?" she asked. The guard hesitated before handing her a sealed envelope. "This is from Ethan. He asked me to give it to you." Rebecca accepted the envelope with a nod, her curiosity piqued. Later that night, she opened it to find a note and a small donation receipt. Ethan had donated the last of his savings to a foundation supporting single mothers, an organization Rebecca herself had founded. The note read simply, "Thank you for teaching me what justice truly means." Rebecca stood at her window that night, looking out over the city. The lights sparkled like 1,000 tiny reminders of how far she had come. Ethan's gesture, though small, felt like a fitting end to their story, a final acknowledgement of the woman he had underestimated and the justice she had pursued not just for herself but for others. As Nathan slept peacefully in the next room, Rebecca felt a profound sense of peace. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the future held. Her story wasn't just one of survival, it was one of triumph. And as she turned off the light and headed to bed, Rebecca knew she had reclaimed her life and her power on her own terms. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.